Sir, most of them are from engineering, sir.
Oh, at what stage? Third year, final year, first year?
Around 80% of people are from final year, sir, and remaining people are from third years.
Okay,
Pujita, please go ahead.
okay.
Yeah,
What I propose to do is I will not speak for more than 10-15 minutes. I'll make it interactive, right?
Okay, sir. Sure, sir.
Okay. When you're ready, I'm ready.
Pujita, please go ahead.
audible?
Yes. Your voice is audible.
The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. A very good evening to one and all. I, Pujita Reddy, is representing on behalf of IET ISF VBIT, would like to welcome our respected chairman, Dr. N. Gautam Rao sir, Secretary, Dr. G. Manohar Reddy sir, Chief Speaker, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayana sir, Principal, Dr. G. Amarendra Rao sir, Vice Principal, Dr. C. H. Excellent Sridhar sir, Professor of Physics and Director, IQAC, Dr. Jan Kulkarni sir, Professor and Controller of Examinations, Dr. B. Brahma Reddy sir, Professor and Director, Academics, Dr. D. Devendranath sir, our beloved HOD, Dr. Y. Srinivas sir, and HODs of all departments, faculty coordinators, Mrs. B. Rajeshwari ma'am and Mrs. Niharika ma'am, faculties of all departments, and participants for the day. The Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers (IETE) is India's leading professional society devoted to the advancement of science, technology, electronics and telecommunication and information technology. IET ISF VBIT was started in the year 2nd April 2008. IET ISF VBIT has been conducting many technical and non-technical events which help the participants to gain knowledge and the organizers to improve their capacity of organizing an event. Now, we have come up with a lucrative and awaiting webinar on A Way for Union Service Public Commission UPSC. I now request Principal Sir to speak a few words in the session.
Thank you, Pujita. Esteemed speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan Garu, IAS, our beloved chairman, Dr. Gautam Rao Garu, our beloved secretary, Dr. Manohar Reddy Garu, dear Vice Principal, Dr. Sridhar Garu, HOD of ECE, Dr. Y. Srinivas Garu, directors of various units, HODs, members of faculty, and my dear students. A pleasant good evening to every one of you present in this virtual meeting. At the outset, I wish to extend my grateful thanks to Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan Garu for consenting to our request to share his vast knowledge on how to become successful in UPSC and other competitive examinations. Welcome you, sir. I take this opportunity to dwell over a few minutes about our institute, Vijnana Bharati Institute of Technology, popularly known as VBIT. VBIT is established in the year 2004 by highly qualified members of management. Ever since its establishment, the institute has grown in all perspectives. To mention a few, we are permanently affiliated to JNTU Hyderabad. All our engineering branches are NBA accredited, and we have got NAAC accreditation, and we are getting funds towards research and development from various organizations like ISRO, state government organizations, and we have got high-end laboratories and highly qualified faculty to cater to the present needs of the students. I am very glad that we have 6 directorates in addition to HODs who will groom the students in their respective areas. Particularly, Industry Institute Interaction Cell, which is the connecting link between academics and the real life, is playing an important role in widening the horizons of the students. And in addition to regular JNTH curriculum, we are also having so many value-added programs right from the first year of BTech itself. And I'm glad that all our efforts are giving very good fruits, and our students are getting benefited by way of placements and by way of getting admissions into premier institutions. And I'm very happy that we are going to take the turn into a different direction, perhaps most lucrative directions, that is UPSC. And I'm very happy that Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan Garu is going to throw a lot of light on how to crack UPSC. And as per his decision, as per his follow-up, you will be spending less time in his talk, and you would like to have more and more interaction with the faculty. That interactive mode of delivery of speech will be very effective. So I hope that all the students present over here will get maximum out of it. And I'd like to see some of you becoming prestigious IAS officer or IPS officers down the line. Please plan ahead, and you please take our chief guest as the role model, because he's well known a person across the entire country. After reading his biodata, really I was thrilled. So I hope that this webinar will be a grand success. And I would like to congratulate IETE for coming up with this idea, and all the faculty involved over here to bring Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan Garu for this wonderful webinar. And I wish this program a grand success, and I wish everyone all the best of luck. Take care of yourself, stay home, stay safe, but keep learning in your own field of interest. So thank you, Pujita. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable words and time. Even before I hand over the session to the chief speaker for the day, I would like to give a brief introduction about this people's leader, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayana, sir, Indian liberal politician, retired IAS officer. Dr. Jayaprakash Narayana, sir, is an Indian liberal politician, a former physician. Jayaprakash Narayana, sir, is a political reformer and a columnist. He is the founder and president of Lok Satta Party and was an ex-member of the Legislative Assembly from Kukatpally constituency, Andhra Pradesh in India. He is also the founder and general secretary of Foundation for Democratic Reforms, NGO, an independent public policy think tank and research center. Dr. Jayaprakash Narayana, sir, joined public administration after making it to IAS in 1980, standing All India Rank 4. He worked on agriculture, irrigation, technology, and youth rehabilitation projects in various capacities and in various districts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Some of his achievements during his 16-long-year career in government include: as Joint Collector, he created full and permanent employment for 8,000 youth from displaced families of the Visakhapatnam steel plant. As Collector of East Godavari district, he spearheaded the reconstruction of drainage and irrigation network in Krishna, Prakasam and Godavari deltas. As Collector of Prakasam district, he successfully mobilized farmers on a large scale to take up irrigation schemes to bring a record 2 lakh acres under irrigation. He strengthened the credit cooperatives by making them independent of government control. Served as a secretary to both Governor Krishna Kant and Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, N.T. Rama Rao. It's an honor to welcome you, sir, for taking up this webinar. I now hand over the session to our speaker of the day, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayana, sir.
Thank you, friends. I am asked to discuss with you or interact with you on civil service examination. I do not intend to do so, because how to clear the examination is not important for the country. There is enormous demand for civil services. About 1 million people apply every year. About 500,000 people take the preliminary examination, and probably about 15,000 or 20,000 people appear for the main examination. And then there's a final process of personality test interview. About 1,000 people get selected. Now, 100 of them go to probably IAS on an average. Whether X makes it or Y makes it, it doesn't make a difference to the country. I wanted to think of it from the taxpayer's point view, from citizens' point of view. The moment you think of civil service as a job and as a career, from an individual's point of view, that's the way most people tend to think of it in India, then I think the beginning of failure is already there. The seeds of failure are already sown. That's the reason why after such an intensive examination, after a very impressive pattern of recruitment, and UPSC must be complimented for doing a remarkable job. It's a very highly respected institution. Nobody so far ever made a credible allegation of either corruption or partisanship in selection to premier civil services, because in this country, there is so much of demand for these services. There'll be so much of pressure applied if only UPSC yields to those pressures. One can only imagine. And yet, in a very difficult environment, UPSC has done a remarkable job. The state public service commissions have not always been able to do a similar job in recruitment to state services. In some states, it's done pretty well. In quite a few states, there are serious complaints. But the point is, as citizens and taxpayers, why should we care who gets selected? As long as the person chosen actually has the ability to give us good administration. I wanted to think of it from the point of view. Don't make it merely a method of cracking the examination. Because you're all bright kids. If you can make it to civil services, I can guarantee you, you can make it to almost anything, anywhere. You can be successful in your careers. You can start a business, you can start an enterprise, you can innovate, you can join a management job or a technology job, and you can rise with hard work and dedication. And you will actually be more successful in material terms. The word lucrative has been used today by both your principal and some of you. UPSC is not lucrative at all. It is about serving the public. If you look for money, there are other jobs where there's a lot more money available with a lot less of stress, lot less of hard work. And nothing wrong in that. Choose those jobs. Make the best of your career, because you don't owe an apology to anybody for making a success of your life. You all have your dreams. You want to fulfill your dreams. As long as you do an honest job and create wealth, if you become prosperous, if you fulfill your dreams, have a good life, there's nothing wrong with that. UPSC is not about a good life for the individual. It's not about a rich life. It's not even about glory. It's about the opportunity to make a difference to the country, for the collective, not for the individual. One of the tragedies of India is that far too many people view this as an individual accomplishment. And the moment they get selected, they think my life is now made. If all these fellows are so great, why is the country in such a mess? The mechanics of the examination, you all know. There's a preliminary examination, 2 papers, 200 marks each. It's of a qualifying nature in the sense that it only counts for selection for the main examination, screening for the main examination. It does not count for the final merit. One of these 2 papers is primarily the general awareness, whether it's history or geography, or call it constitution and the polity, or the economy and science and technology, so on and so forth. The other paper is largely logic and ethics. It's to see the qualities of the mind and the heart. On the basis of these 2 papers, X number are chosen with a cutoff mark for the main examination. Main examination, I'm sure you're all familiar. The data is known. You can just access it in a website anytime, anywhere. There are 9 papers, 2 of which are languages, essentially for a qualifying purpose. You're required to clear them. They're not very difficult. 1 English and 1 language of your choice. In the 8th schedule, any Indian language of your choice. The balance 7 papers, they count for your merit. 5 of them, 1 of them is an essay paper. It is to see how well you can marshal an argument, whether there's consistency in your logic, whether there is ethical approach in your thinking, whether you are evidence-based, whether you know how to communicate effectively, lucidly, persuasively. Then there are 4 general studies papers. Essentially, one is about history, geography, culture, so on and so forth. Another one is about the polity, the constitution, and the governance, etc. The third one is about science and technology and related aspects. The fourth one is about aptitude and ethics. Apart from these 5 papers which count for merit, there are 2 papers of an optional subject of your choice. A wide variety is offered, and you can pick up any one of those. So 7 papers count for the merit, each 750 marks. And then there is a personality test and interview counting for 275. These are the mechanics. But I'm not going to go into those details. I'm challenging you. Why should you be in the civil services? What does the nation get out of you or anybody else joining the civil services? If you view it merely as a personal aggrandizement opportunity, an opportunity for the career of an individual, I think that's very disappointing for the country. So what I would like to do in the next 5-10 minutes, I would like to place before you the way to look at it, and then I'll leave it open to the interaction. First, we must understand what is the role of the government. After all, if you clear the civil service examination, you want to join the government. Why government? What is the purpose of a government? Oftentimes we take things for granted. We don't ever bother about trying to look deeper. We have no clarity about the first principles. But if you don't have that clarity as a civil servant, I can guarantee you, you cannot succeed as a public servant. We, the people, the citizens, have created a government. It's an artificial entity. Human society created this all over the world. And in a democratic society, we put the people in positions of office. We elect them, and through a constitutional or legal process, we put the appointed public servants, the bureaucracy, in place. They are the servants of the people. And we, the people, fund the government through taxes or the borrowings on our behalf, which we have to repay or our children have to repay. So it's all owned by us. So why have we created the government, and why are we funding this government? Enormous tax money, the hard-earned money from each of us is going to the government. Why? Because there are things that individuals cannot do for themselves. There are things that can only be done collectively, while a lot of things are in the hands of the individual and the family. You, your family, you decide what you want, how you want. That's what freedom is. But there are some things which you cannot decide, no matter how wealthy you are, how powerful you are. You cannot build a school for your child. You cannot build a hospital for your family. You cannot have a road only for yourself, or an airport, or a seaport, or 100 other things, from a drinking water to many other amenities. These are the collective needs that can only be fulfilled by an entity representing all of us. It is to serve the collective that the government has come about. So what are the essential functions of the government in a modern society? Start with that. Obviously, defense and currency, that goes without saying. There's no dispute on that. Let me go to the other issues. The first in society that the government should perform is justice, public order, rule of law. Public order is merely maintaining peace and order. But justice is a more complicated concept, settling disputes and ensuring the rights of individuals are protected. Rule of law is even a broader concept, that there's nobody above law and everybody stands on the same footing, irrespective of birth, rich, poor, in power, out of power, ruling party, opposition, educated, uneducated, upper caste, lower caste. Everybody is equal before the law. So the first set of things that we have to perform as a government are this whole rule of law, public order, justice, rule of law. Our public order is reasonably good because of a strong society. But our rule of law and justice are very weak. I don't want to go into details. The delays in courts, the number of cases pending, world record, 30 million cases. And hundreds of thousands of people, poor people, only because they don't have money, being incarcerated in prisons for minor offenses, trivial offenses. All these indicate that there is no serious rule of law. On paper, it exists. In reality, We are not able to ensure the rule of law applicability to every citizen. There's a huge problem. Once we address the rule of law issues, then the government is for basic infrastructure, public goods, transport, electricity. Earlier, I would have said communications, your field. But now, mercifully, government only creates a framework, and government allowed both technology and competition. And therefore, you and I are able to converse. 30 years ago, that was not there. Government controlled everything. People were denied even a simple access to a telephone. Electricity only now we are beginning to get. Even 50, 60 years ago, most of the civilized countries, every family had access to electricity 24 hours a day. But even today, there are large segments of Indian population where 24-hour power is a luxury, unbelievable luxury. Transport systems are decrepit in our country. One single port in China handles more cargo than all the ports of India put together. While our infrastructure is improving compared to what it was, we have a long way to go. By global standards, with comparable economies, we are really not doing well at all. There's a lot more we need to do. And the basic amenities, drinking water. There's not a household which can afford to drink water from the tap. We have AquaGuard, we have bottled water, we have reverse osmosis plants, all sorts of things to sustain us. Sewerage system, you go on the road anywhere in Hyderabad, any day, you will find the sewers overflowing habitually. We're used to it. There's nothing unusual or strange about it for us. It must be offensive to the sensitivity of any human being in this day and age, in a civilized society. Stormwater drainage. When there's no rain, we all complain. When there's a bit of rain, let's say 100 millimeter rainfall during monsoon, which is not extraordinary, you will see the streets of even big cities flooded. Very poor basic amenities. These are the first things that the government must perform after rule of law. Basic infrastructure and basic amenities. Then quality education. You're all there in your institution, the VBIT, for instance, because of your intelligence and hard work, but more important, the dedication and sacrifice of your parents. There are millions of children in our country who are bright, who are endowed by nature with the talent, innate talent. Their parents sacrifice a great deal. They have dreams for their children, just like your parents have. But merely because of the circumstances of birth, because of our substandard education system, 80% of them have no future. 80% of the gene pool of India is wasted. In no modern society is education so bad. That is government's primary function after infrastructure. We have a country without skills. We have a country without knowledge, without the capacity to leverage modern technology to enhance productivity. Without that, there cannot be incomes, there cannot be jobs, there cannot be economic growth, and there cannot be equality before law or equality in society. If you want the caste system to disappear, if you want poverty to end, if you want our kids to get jobs, if you want our economy to grow, there's only one single passport: quality education with skills. We are extremely deficient in that. And then healthcare. I myself am a medical doctor by training. We are among the worst in the world in healthcare. It is not COVID that is the crisis. Even without COVID, every single day, 2,000 children below 5 years of age are dying in this country. Most of them are preventable deaths. They can be easily prevented or treated. 2,000 children a day, the world's record. Every year, more than 5.5 crore people, 5.5 crore people every year, the people who were not poor at the beginning of the year are becoming poor by the end of the year because of the healthcare costs or because of ill health. 5.5 crores is larger than the population of 90% of the countries of the world. You look at it not as an officer in government, look at it as a citizen, a taxpayer. See how much the government needs to do, how poorly the government is performing. Then think of your role as bright young people, idealistic young people who want to make a difference to the public good. Are you equipped to do that? Do you care passionately? If you're not really keen to do that, there's nothing wrong. There are 100 other things you can do. You can be good people in science and technology, in enterprise, in professions, in business. You can play an important role in the economy of our society, create wealth, create jobs, fulfill the needs of the people. But if you want to serve the collective, then you must have a different qualities of the mind. And above all, you must rise above the pettiness and tribalism. In a country with so many castes and regions and religions and languages, all kinds of diversity imaginable in human history. If you adhere to your caste, your region, your religion, and you are not able to rise above that, or your political affiliation, then you are unfit to be in public service. Do you have the capacity to look at all your fellow human beings in our country to start with, and across the world eventually, as one, transcending these differences? Are you a part of the problem or a part of the solution? If you're going to be a part of the problem, perpetuating status quo, then I plead with you, please do not go to civil services. Leave it to others. But if you're willing to be and capable of being a part of the solution, then yes, you should look at that. If you don't make it to civil services, it's not the end of the world. If you make it to civil services, you have not achieved a great victory. Both are extremely dangerous notions. In a sane society, anybody of real ability, if she is among the best in the country in that field at that point of time after years of experience and expertise, then that person, if she has the desire and the will to make a difference to the public good, must be able to join civil services parallelly, serve as long as she needs to do whatever is there to fulfill her dream in a sector of her choice, and then walk out and then do her own business in life. That's the kind of sensible civil service structure we must build. Because our civil services, while recruitment is very good, there is no specialization. The notion that anybody can do any job at any time is a nonsensical notion in the 21st century. We are in a highly specialized world. Unless you are top of the game, unless you are among the best in that field, unless you are a master of that field, you have no business to make decisions affecting the lives of millions of people in that sector. You cannot be health secretary today, education secretary tomorrow, defense secretary day after, and then a fourth day, commerce secretary. You have to specialize. You cannot have a lifelong security, no matter whether you serve the public or not. One of the reasons why 1 million people make application, and probably tens of millions for all the government jobs put together. The reason is that once you join, you are there for life, no matter what. Lifelong security. It's a terrible thing. You're put there in order to perform. You're paid by the people, the ordinary people, hardworking people, the taxpayers. If you cannot serve them, you have no business to continue there. That must be changed. And the reason why for the senior civil services, premier services, there's so much of demand is you have a monopoly of the key jobs in the country, which is again a terrible thing. Anybody enjoying a monopoly will perform very poorly. You must be open to competition from other services and from every citizen in the country. If there are people capable in any field in the country, they must be allowed to enter. They must be allowed to compete for a tenure. You must radically reshape civil services. I am one of those who have been working hard to make that happen. I was a member of the Administrative Reforms Commission, among other things. I hope we will wake up as a country and reform our civil services to make things productive for our people, not for our employees. And therefore, you will have opportunity 10, 15 years later, if you develop expertise in any field, if you have passion for public good, to make a contribution to the public good as a public servant. You don't have to necessarily join now in this competitive examination. If your heart tells you you must do this, by all means, try it. but don't take it as a matter of life or death. Give your best shot, but above all, think of the country, the collective, in a practical way. If you make it to the civil services, do your best to acquire professionalism, the skills, the knowledge, and see that you can serve the society as well as is humanly possible. If for whatever reason you do not make it now, the heavens have not fallen. Mere better scores in one examination don't make you a great guy. If you get a few marks less, they don't make you a bad guy. It's irrelevant. You can make a huge contribution to public good in your chosen field, whichever be the sector, whichever be the profession, whatever be the method you choose, as long as it's legal, as long as it's ethical, as long as it serves a collective purpose. And if you want to join the civil services, I hope, and many of us will do our best to make that happen, I hope that there will be avenues available to the brightest Indians to join at any time of their choosing, to serve for a time, make a difference, and then walk out with dignity. So look at it differently. Don't look at it as IAS. Don't look at it as a cinematic thing. Don't look at it as a position of power, that you have arrived. That's a terrible way to look at it. Look at it as an important function to perform the collective functions, to serve the collective needs, to serve the taxpayers. No more, no less. I hope you will make that choice. And if you do get selected, I hope you will do what is right for the country consistently. Saying I will do is no good. Everybody says, I love the country, I want to do so much for the country. But very few people actually are doing that once in public service. Let me be very blunt. So it's not speeches that matter. It is actually ability to deliver for the country and the passion to deliver. I hope you'll acquire that ability to deliver, that passion to deliver, and make a difference in civil services or as citizens. I wish you all the very best. I now invite your questions.